Hi, everyone. Okay, so it's time for our opening keynote conversation. I'm joined by Kevin Callahan. Kevin, great to see you with Fox Sports. Sorry, let me say that. Great to see you as always. How are you holding up? And where are you right now, actually?
Doing well. Great to see you as well, Ken. I am actually in my office in the Fox Sports building as we're getting ready for another big NFL weekend.
Excellent, excellent. So we're going to talk about the vault as a little bit of a precursor. I think what I find fun about this conversation with you is, and obviously you and I go back to, I think I remember back to hang out when you were with Game Creek, I think in the parking lot of the Kansas City Royal, out Kansas City for the All-Star game, and connecting the IP trucks, and then over the years your involvement with these IP projects, most notably at the World Cups. Sort of the Confederation Cup and some of the little fly packs kind of things. And I remember, visiting with you in Russia and you discussing how this is really, this is going to be like the future. So I think what we're talking about the vault is really kind of like, I guess it's those systems on steroids are really kind of the complete picture. So let's step back and say, what exactly is the vault so people know what we're talking about. So describe the vault for those who may not be familiar.
So the vault is quite literally our old tape vault here at Fox Sports. In the building, it's a large room where we've gone ahead and we've built out 32 operator positions that we refer to as pods that are all similar and can all perform the function of an EVS operator, replay operator, Viz Arena for first and 10, Foxbox, BA, AD, really can replicate any position in any mobile unit, but here in LA. It's something that we started down the path of really during NASCAR when we needed to socially distance, when we needed to reduce the number of people that we had in the compound. And really, it's been one of the techniques that we're using to do the same thing as we're bringing more and more sports back. This is all about providing people a location where they can do the work that's needed for the show, but remain socially distanced, and also enable the productions themselves not to get any smaller. We wanted to make sure that we're still doing the same size productions and that we don't lose any quality in the production. But we've just remoted the operators.
Right. So let's start with the vault itself. As far as the technical infrastructure, what's the backbone of the facility?
So the backbone is all IP. Everything is IP. And as you mentioned, before when we were talking, we were seeing all of this coming, going back, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And while I'm happy that it's here, we never wanted it to come this way, of course. And I think that the pandemic just, as you'll hear multiple people say, just really expedited the future to come. So we're using IP to transport video. Our video transport right now is done with high vision. One of the unique things is all we're doing in the vault is remoting devices that are already sitting on the mobile units that we're already contracting for, that we would be using. So we didn't have to do a massive, install of replay servers and graphics machines and that here in LA. We just had to put in the infrastructure to move those data signals essentially back and forth to and from the truck. So video, we're using high vision. It is an extremely low latency video platform. And because we're just moving monitors and multi-viewers around, we can speed it up even more by removing some of the error correction features that are inherent with SRT or with that layer of transport. We're moving the serial control for EVS remote controls. We have the LSM controls back in the vault, and that's being done using Moxa technology. Again, nothing that is terribly unique. It's just the uniqueness is connecting to 6, 7, 8 mobile units at a time, keeping them all separate and then of course the distance that we're doing this on. For viz, for graphics, we're using PCOIP, specifically Teradici, and that's been working fantastic. I would, challenge an operator, put two machines next to them, and have them tell me which one is actually here on site on-prem and which one they're controlling remotely. It is that fast, I'll say. Then for KVMs, for EVSs, because EVS, and the way that the EVS screens are built right now, we're using black box KVMs to go ahead and do that. So it's not a lot of infrastructure. One of the benefits is because we've gone ahead and built this out as a permanent, temporary build, we've gone ahead and actually all of the signals that come in actually come in and hit our building router now, our facility router. So we're able to leverage this for other feeds, for halftime shows and things like that if needed. But it's really, when we started out with NASCAR, it was truly an island. And now we've gone ahead and we've integrated this into our facility.
Now, as far as the personnel or who's not at a game A, B, or C, or D, when do you start that? Does it change a lot from week to week as far as, okay, for this game, we're going to have these many operators working here, and this one's going to be a little bit less, more people on site? Does it depend on who's within driving distance of a venue or anything like that? Or
when we get to college, I think there's going to be a lot of that. With NFL, it is it's pretty regimented, where certain crews have a certain number of travelers on site, a certain number of core on site, and a certain number of operators in the vault. As an example, Thursday Night Football has 5 operators on site, and then 6 operators back in Los Angeles. Our 5th and 6th shows each have 1 EVS operator on site, but they have their entire graphics team. So their Viz operator, their Foxbox operator, and both of their BAs back here in Los Angeles.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of a fine line. I'll say each of the trucks, each of the kits that we sent out, the Production Anywhere Remote kits, as we call them, has the ability to do more than what is assigned. So if we weren't able to get somebody into a venue for whatever reason, we could add another operator back here in Los Angeles for a given show. And as our shows are starting to grow, particularly on the college side, they're looking to expand, saying, hey, can we get, I know we normally have 2 operators for that show in the vault, but this show is going to be a little bit bigger. We can't put any more operators on site. Can we get 4 operators in the vault? So we're working through that and making sure that we don't have any resource conflicts with, the space that we have and operators and the like.
So what is in the kit that's then sent out to be deployed?
So the kit itself, again, it's very basic. We went ahead and we standardized on a rack size, 16 RU, of which we really only need about 8. It has some firewalls that allow us to either use EVPL or high-speed internet. We actually don't care. We work well on both. Some network switches for redundancy, and then it is double 2 Moxa boxes that allow us, again, that redundancy. Everything that we're doing has that redundancy built into it. So it's Moxa boxes to move the 422 data back and forth. It's going to be a rack of high vision or a frame of high vision encoders and some decoders for us to be able to send some signals back, and then the black box KVM transmitters itself. Again, it's a pretty simple setup. The way that we've designed it, we worked with all of our mobile unit vendors, NEP, Game Creek, Mobile TV Group so far, to make sure that we can integrate into their mobile units without too much of a hassle. We do move back. I left 2 things out, or really 3 things out earlier. On a regular basis, we move comms back via Arvon, and we are trunked into each truck's intercom frame. So they connect into an intercom frame we have in the vault. And then from there, we're able to distribute the comms to any panel that we need. Um, we're also moving router control data. Most of the routers these days are also IP. So it's really just a matter of once we're connected into the network that we're able to extend the router panels onto our network. So, we'll have, a station that's being used by, say Game Creek Gridiron for a college football Saturday being used by Game Creek Bravo on an NFL Sunday.
Right.
They both have the same routers, that sort of thing. The other thing that we're doing, which is really unique, really exciting, and I hope that we never have to use this for real, but we actually have a full Callahan panel sitting in what we call the TD room in the vault, and we have a backup TD booked every Saturday, every Sunday, and that one TD will back up all of our TDs in case if one isn't allowed entry for whatever reason. That panel over IP can connect into any of the mobile units with protection, so that we're not connecting to the wrong mobile unit, and the mobile unit needs to be aware of it.
Right.
But that gives us the ability to back up every show in case if a TD isn't able to make it, instead of having to get a TD in each city or having to fly a spare TD or a whole second crew somewhere. I think that's one of those really unique things that we always knew was possible, but really wasn't explored that deeply. And then we brought Colby Bourgeois out. We tested it with all of our vendors to their mobile units in the shops, and proved that it really does work. And now it's part of our setup process on Friday and Saturday. We're going to pick truck name essentially out of a hat, and we're going to say, okay, that TD isn't getting in today. Let's make sure that we all know how to do this both on our side and on the mobile unit side to make it happen.
Right. So walk me through the evolution then, going back to, let's start with the Confederation Cup, because that was the first time, if I recall, I really saw this vision that you had where, we're in Russia, which is not the best place to try to fly in a lot of crew, and there was no U.S. team playing, I think, which is another issue I do recall. So how's it kind of evolved since then, the whole concept and the IP connectivity?
It's really just, the ability to get bandwidth places is getting easier and easier and easier. And the fact that all of the vendors are starting to move towards IP or have made the shift to IP for everything, for video, for control, makes all of this possible. And, it's things that we were having to find, I'll say, workarounds and cheat codes for in 2017 are now very easily doable in 2020. Not everything is exactly as easy as we'd like it to be, but the vendors are being very, very responsive and listening and realizing that this is very much the future for better or for worse.
Right.
So, we always sat there, and 2017, as you mentioned, was a really small show, and we were pretty much doing IP between venues and our IBC location. 2018, we stepped it up a little bit, where we were doing IP between our venues and IBC. We're doing IP between our studio location in Red Square back to the IBC, and we started to do a little bit across the pond, going from Moscow back into Los Angeles. We had our entire nighttime show was done as a home run production from Los Angeles. And then the shift really happened with Paris, where we really shifted into what we're calling production anywhere, where you could have anything anywhere, and that's where we are now. The reasoning behind it for Paris was we didn't have the physical space to put the graphics and EVS operators on site. And we got to thinking, do they even need to be on site? Do we need to, if we're going to have them, across town, at the IBC as opposed to being at the set location, what's the difference if they're 3,000 or 5,000 miles away back in the States?
Right.
It becomes more of a time zone challenge than anything else. So for that one, we went ahead and we moved control of graphics devices, not the PCOIP like we're doing now, but we're sending engine commands into Paris, and we had router control in the States of the physical router that was in Paris, but we were still moving a lot of high-res video back and forth. We weren't doing the recording on site in Paris. When the pandemic hit and we needed to start looking at bringing NASCAR back, we tried to figure out, okay, what is the best way to do this? Ironically, since my days on NASCAR, the paradigm has shifted tremendously in terms of the bandwidth offerings at NASCAR tracks. When I was there, we were lucky if we had 2 bonded T1s, getting a total of 2.8 megabits per second for the entire compound.
Right.
And now, there's 10 gig that's shared across the compound. So we started looking at, okay, where does it make sense to have people? Let's, going with the production anywhere model, where does it make sense to have people? So our announcers were in Charlotte, and then it made sense to have the producer with the announcers. We wanted to keep the director on site because we wanted to sit there and maintain that, going to the international world of things, that track feed, if you will, where so you knew no matter what, you're going to get a line cut of the cameras. And we had multiple ways to get that out. We had one EVS operator on site because he also served as the backup TD. And then we outboarded, really 8 tape machines to Los Angeles, eight EVSs to Los Angeles. And, it was one of those things, it was a lot of work getting it done. And it was, I don't want to say sleepless nights, but it was, long days and, worrying, because it's one of those things that, we've talked about for years that, yeah, this should be possible. We can do this. The pandemic made it more difficult because we couldn't really test it properly. Right. We couldn't go out on the road and build something and test it. But we knew the theory was sound. We knew that it could work, and it did. It was one of those things that we didn't have. It wasn't as smooth as we wanted to when we first plugged in, but by the time we were on air, everything was fine. One of the producer who was in Charlotte made the comment that hearing the EVS operators actually sounded closer to him when they were in LA than when he was in the A unit and they were in the B unit. Like, to him, it was, hey, this is fantastic.
Right.
We had similar challenges with the rollout for NFL and for college football, where just getting equipment was tough. We had a lot of backorder equipment. We had a lot of tight deadlines. I will tell you, there were sleepless nights going into NFL. Doing it, connecting to one truck is okay.
One thing, right?
When you're sitting there and trying to connect to 6 different trucks all at the same time, that definitely raised the complexity level of things.
What was the biggest challenge? You can't just say this truck's plugged in here, this truck's plugged in there. It's not that simple. Is that where there's still work to be done in terms of IP connectivity or streamlining of things? Or
so streamlining of things. I think version 2.0, or as we start to move along and seeing that this is going to be with us for a while, adding an orchestration layer on top of everything is really what's needed to be able to sit there and basically just say, okay, I'm going to assign pod 32 to the Broncos Jets game as EVS 3, and have that move the router control, have that move the serial data, have that move the black box, and change the video routes. all by assigning that. That's the next step in this, and it's all doable. It's just a matter of time. Right now that's somebody making 4 different mouse clicks essentially.
Right.
The way that I've watched NFL Sundays has certainly changed. Where before I would sit there and be watching all of the games and see what's going on, and now I'm sitting here looking at graphs of bandwidth and ping times, making sure that everything is within spec. We're not oversubscribing our bandwidth or anything like that.
Right. So now, what has been the reaction of because when we do these stories, obviously invariably a lot of people who are freelancers, who are graphics operators, replay operators say like this, they get a little freaked out by this. I would argue that there's the potential for them to be doing this from their home at some point. So maybe that whole thing could change also. What's been the reaction of, the people who are doing their jobs in this environment and their just general reaction to working this way?
For the most part, the folks that are here are accepting of it. They're always offering suggestions for improvement. Anytime that you sit there and you put 32 people in a room working on 6 different games,
right?
You're going to have we're having some I'll say some commotion issues. When you sit there, and it's interesting.
Right.
There, like you hear, a touchdown in one area. There's kind of like a little bit of excitement going on, and then another area, it does get loud at times, and those are things that we're working on. You mentioned that someone will be doing this from home one day. In fact, we actually have an editor who is working from home. He's working on America's Game of the Week. He's working on Thursday Night Football, and then on single header weeks, we're able to go ahead and figure out what the best game of the week is, or the weekend is, and assign him to that. So now he's working more than he had been working previously. We're getting, a better product on some of our smaller shows. So it's not all downside. It's not all doom and gloom. My utopian view of this is I see, a world where whether it's us or a service provider sits there and starts popping up places like what we have in the vault that are network agnostic, that are vendor agnostic, that if you're an operator in Pittsburgh, well, Fox or CBS or ESPN or NBC or whoever hires you, and there's 10 or 12 pods there, and there might be 6 games going on, and there's 10 or 12 people and they're working 6 different games, and you're not traveling as much, but you're still getting the same amount of work. So maybe, a service provider builds them in Pittsburgh and Dallas and Chicago and San Francisco, Seattle. I don't know what the markets are right now.
Right.
New York, of course. But I think that's really the next evolution for this, where it's not just a one-for-one relationship with a network, but it's more as an industry, as a group, we get together and start to try and figure this out so that it makes the most sense for all of us.
Yeah, there's gonna be some fascinating opportunities. I always like to think that you could sit there and say, what, if you and I are 2 of the top EVS operators, but you live in Seattle and I live in, Pensacola, and then there's 3 other top level EVS operators, we could form our own little company and be like, what, you want to hire all 5 of us? We are the best of the best and the creme de la creme. And then, there's so many cool ways that this thing could all spin. And it could, out of control, I guess, a little bit. I was going to say that. So, but
it can. You certainly worry about anytime that you don't have control over connectivity.
Right.
You don't have control over something. It becomes a worry. So having the editor at home. On one of the set days, all of a sudden he called and said I lost connectivity, and we're sitting there. It's like, oh, everything else on the mobile unit is up. We can't connect to your router anymore. And he's like, oh, you know what? My internet's down. And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
And when you sit there, and anytime that we do something on the traditional broadcast side, we're always going to be belts and suspenders. We're going to have 2 connections from 2 different providers or protected services. When you start to get into having things at operators' houses, and you start getting into consumer internet, I mean, think about how many Zoom calls we've all been on in the past, 6 months where, someone starts getting a little, breaking up a little bit, or you can't hear anything.
Right.
That's the world that you're in. And it's like, okay, are we okay with that on a live broadcast? To me, because we're just moving control data, we're not moving the video, the bandwidth requirements are a lot less. We will do a 7-game NFL Sunday, having everything up at the same time, and be at about 750 megabits a second for 7 games worth,
right.
And 31 operators worth of content.
And that's the big advantage.
Amazing.
And that's the big advantage of having the servers at location. That's
correct.
Right.
Yeah, we're not moving it. We don't have to move any high bandwidth video anymore. We are truly just moving, low res content. And then when it comes to the data for the EVS controller, and honestly for the switcher, we're talking kilobits of data. We're talking nothing.
Right.
When you start getting into, PCOIP, Teradici, that's a little bit heavier, and black box can with the VGA screens, it's not that much with the KVMs, but.
Right. Excellent. Well, thanks. Well, I appreciate your time, Kevin. Obviously, we'll keep in touch as this develops, because I know it's going to continue to develop. And as we were talking, I was thinking about, with the Super Bowl when it was in MetLife, and how you were at the key of that amazing project to put the editing systems in the Hilton in New York, in Manhattan, across the river.
The Millennium Hotel.
Right. So that was like the biggest accomplishment. It was like the coolest thing. So it's always fascinating to look back on what was cool and how quickly things evolve. And Lord knows what we'll be thinking about this project in 5 or 6 years when the world is virtualized, and it's fascinating. So
yeah, no problem. It's one of those things, thinking back to that Super Bowl, we had 60 gigabits of data between MetLife and Times Square.
That's right.
And probably only really needed, a gig tops.
Right.
So it's amazing how much we've learned and how much more we're doing with less. And as you say, I can't imagine, where we're going to be, come, 2026, 2028, when you start getting into, the next series of, Olympics and World Cups. It's just going to be astounding where we end up.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. Thank you.